Hello, everyone. My name is Beth Guide, and I'm with Talking Purple. We're a new podcast, and what we hope to do is take apart issues in simple, everyday terms and taking out the partisan rhetoric that seems to be all over each and every issue. It's really hard these days to tell what the truth is anymore, and we want to give you a way to do that, at least for the way we see it. We try to be impartial. We try to present items in a manner that everybody understands, and we're going to end up long term with some people that are going to come in and they're going to talk with me and give both sides of the issue when we have them, so that we present all aspects. One of the gentlemen that'll be talking with me, he swears that part of the problem is that the algorithms on social media don't present the other side. So we're going to try to present the other side on every topic we talk about and give both sides of the story as much as possible. So I had originally intended to jump off with a national issue, and I really wanted to talk about the government shutdown. There's a lot of misinformation within that government shutdown that I think are coming from both sides. There's a lot of rhetoric, there's a lot of spinning, there's a lot of misinformation that I think stops everybody from understanding really what's happening and what the ask is and what's not being given and what's been removed. And we'll get to that later this week, I think. But for today, something came up, and I think this is although it's a localized issue, I think it's well worth the time for me to go ahead and use this as my inaugural show. Only time will tell if this is the right or the wrong topic to jump off with. But so we have an interesting situation that's going on here in Houston, Texas. And we have a congressman, my congressman, which is Dan Crenshaw, and he is being primaried, was being primaried by about 3 or 4 different people. Now I think we're down to 3 people that are primarying him. I live in a community that has had some bad flooding issues for probably the last 20 years out of the 40 that I've lived here. And I think that I want to bring that out and bring that up. And in part, I'm hoping that this podcast will educate everybody on positioning so that we sort of understand what's going on and why. For anybody that knows me locally knows that flooding really became my issue. And the one thing I say that drives people crazy sometimes, I suppose, is when someone tells you who they are, believe them. And I've had a situation going on now with the candidate that's running against Dan Crenshaw that I think that I want to address and I want to share with everybody. And you guys make your own mind up about this. So the gentleman's name that I want to address, his name is Steve Toth, and he is presently the House of Representatives District 15 representative, and he represents Montgomery County. And Montgomery County is directly to the north of where my home is. In fact, I can see Montgomery County across the street from me because literally it's on the other side of the row of houses in front of my house. So I am literally 150 feet from Montgomery County. I've lived in Kingwood for 40 years, and I live in a neighborhood that never flooded up until a few years ago. But it flooded because of issues with Montgomery County. We have been very fortunate that Dan Crenshaw has backed up the flooding issues for Kingwood and the flooding initiatives. He's been very dedicated to it. And I, for one, when I called my congressman, I really don't know that I expected a lot of help from anybody. I had never done it before. And when I did it, they not only did they come and help us, they've never left my neighborhood. Now, I'm talking specifically about my neighborhood because there's a much larger flooding situation here. But Mr. Toth has not even allowed any of us the opportunity to speak about it. Every time we try to say there's a flooding issue, we're being told, no, it was some entity. And I'll get into the nuts and bolts of that in just a second here. But what I want to say on the front side of this is that there is a real Bloods and Crips mentality between Montgomery County and Kingwood. Montgomery County wants to make their county the best. I don't wrong them for that. They are in a rapid build mode, and their rapid build mode often neglects good, solid principles on how not to flood a neighborhood. Builders want to come in and build things for the least amount and charge the most amount. That's capitalism at its finest. And we don't have a problem with capitalism at all. It's not something that I would even begin to have a problem with. But what I do have a problem with is you need to be respectful of other people's houses and other people's lives. And in our experience, my own personal experience within my neighborhood, that is not what happened. We were a neighborhood that was protected by a glacial lake. That lake was filled in, dirt was put on it. The land was cut down, not in accordance to the way building laws should have been put in. They made sure they had permitting before flood standards were passed for the neighborhood. There's a myriad of things that were done that were in violation of the law. And when I went up, again, naively, went up at the time to inquire, the first thing I was told is let the men handle it, little lady. So that kind of sets the tone for what I was dealing with. And then the next thing that happened was basically I was told they don't have the manpower up there to enforce the law, so they have no intention of doing it. Okay. We're 5 years out from that. With some help with the city of Houston, I was able to go in and fix this problem. And I say I, because I did it with me and my Houston city councilman. The two of us locked arm in arm. It was the two of us from start to finish. There wasn't a lot of input from other people to help us at the time. But instead of listening to what I have to say, I hit a problem. And I'm going to say up front that in Washington, we have a lot of tone deaf people that are there for their own agendas and not the agendas for the people that they represent. And I think that when I see those attributes from somebody before they're elected, I think we're all well advised to take some heed to that. Because if somebody is not going to listen to you before they have your vote, why do we think they're going to do it afterwards? The other thing that I'm deeply troubled about is I set back two replies to some of the things that were posted on Facebook. And what has now come out to me that is that A, I've been blocked, which, okay, that's fine. But in inquiring about this and asking about it and asking around about it, appears that this candidate, that's their MO. So they sanitize their social media from any negativity. I don't think that's the right way to go. When you become a sitting congressman, you're not allowed to do that under federal law. So we should practice before we become that. So I'll start with that. But I am in positions of leadership in several elected capacities. If somebody disagrees with me, I answer them. It's called being transparent. And the last thing we need is somebody that represents us that is not transparent. So I have not willing to listen, not being transparent. I could probably go as far as to say on some level, I have the right to reply. So you're trampling a little bit on my First Amendment, but I'm not going to necessarily go completely down that road. But you're censoring and censuring what I'm saying. So on some level, I think if you're running, it's no different than you should close comments and not allow any comments on your post. You shouldn't just allow only one side so it looks like everybody is for you and nobody's against you, because that's just not an accurate way to do it. And lastly, what I'm going to say is that one of the pieces that I got back, and I'm going to go through this a little bit more here in a second, but one of the pieces that came back was um, my present congressman would not allow for to help fire a local individual. And that's the 10th Amendment. So I'm sitting here and I'm looking at somebody that is against the Second Amendment, they're against the 10th Amendment, they're got the wrong information. And here's what I really think is going on, okay? What I really think is going on is that there is a really bad fight between Montgomery County and Kingwood. So if you call back to Hurricane Harvey, this community, about a third of it was flooded. I think we had almost 8 to 10,000 homes that were damaged. There was businesses damaged. And the town took almost a year to come back from that situation. What happened was Harvey dumped a lot of rain. The water came down too fast. The Lake Conroe Dam, the water was about to go over the top of it, and they were concerned that that stress on it was going to cause problems. So they released water. And when they released the water, it came downstream so fast it picked up the other water with it. And the water going over the Lake Houston side of this equation was going at a rate faster than Niagara Falls. It was projected to be about 400,000 cubic feet per second. So with that, that's a number on par with Niagara Falls running through this neighborhood. So of course it backed itself up. The water backed itself up because it couldn't get out fast enough, and it flooded a bunch of houses. We had had that same situation happen back in 1994, and our understanding was from the governing body that they would never do that again. And the governing body says this was and I don't really want to get involved with whether they were right or whether they were wrong. Subsequently, the Army Corps of Engineers and multiple other engineering firms have come in and said, okay, what do we need to do to not have this happen again? And they put together a plan that included putting in new gates so that the flow rate on Lake Houston was higher, so it was more on par with what was done with Lake Conroe. There's a whole thing, and not to get involved in the minutia of it all, if you will. What we did do is, thanks to Congressman Crenshaw, we went in and we were able to get a lot of money to dredge this lake out and make it deeper. The lake had not been dredged. Now, just to make you understand, you guys, if you think in a lake, the lakes in Houston are actually reservoirs. They were put in the 50s, and they were done because there was a 7-year drought. So they went through these communities and they put large bodies of water in to be the drinking water for the cities that they serve. So in our case, Lake Houston was put in first. Based on population, it was put in 1953. Based on population, it was there. When we got to the 70s, they were like, it's not enough. So they went and they built Lake Conroe. These are not recreational lakes that you should boat on. These are drinking water lakes. Now, the developers have gone around the edges of these lakes and surely put lake houses in. People boat on them. There's pontoon boats all over them. So not saying that that's necessarily the right thing, but that is what subsequently has happened. The Lake Conroe people don't like their lake lowered to make capacity. So the only thing we've been able to do is dredge down on our side to be able to get more capacity in that way. So back in June, now I'm going to say Mr. Toth announced his election in July. And I think when you run for Congress, you don't get out of bed and say, hey, I'm just going to do that tomorrow. I think you have a little bit of planning to it. Mr. Toth declared in July. In June, I think, there was a vote on a bill here in Houston to create a dredging authority because the federal money and the time frame is running out, and we were going to have to take that over. So as a result, that one piece of some funding that was going to be done is being pulled back, so we were going to have to do it on ourselves. Mr. Toth voted no against creating a dredging authority. His answer was there was no tax authority created with it. which implies to me that he didn't necessarily read the bill because it's a self-funding bill based on the materials that come out of that lake. Apparently, the sand and the silt out of the lake can be used to make concrete. And we have a large project that's going to be done to help storm surge out in the Gulf of Mexico. And the material from Lake Houston was going to be removed and given to that entity. So it was going to become a self-funded program. There was no reason to create a taxing authority. Furthermore, because the lake belongs to the city of Houston, the city of Houston at any point in time can decide through its water program if it needs to fund something that it could do that through that taxing authority. So it is not accurate to say there's no taxing authority because it's not, the mechanism wasn't needed. And because the lake belongs to the city of Houston, it was not a necessary entity. So his explanation of why he's not voting for this doesn't, excuse the pun, doesn't hold water. So there was that aspect. So when we went back and we said, you voted against this, and he said dredging didn't help, we reminded him that he already had met with multiple leaders in our part of the communities that said this helps. So the stories are not being congruent with what is reality, which is why I kind of say this is a little bit of a fantasy, if you will. The problem is, and I think that the overarching problem with Montgomery County is this. I could be funny and say they're flood deniers, but they say there are no floods. And the reason they say there's no floods is because in Montgomery County, they're right, there are no floods. What happens is the way the counties are constructed and the water flow is constructed, that water is sent downstream into Lake Houston and it floods Lake Houston. So they're right, there are no floods in Montgomery County. That is a true 100% fact. But if I remove that in Montgomery County, there is floods, there's a risk of flood. Every large weather event that brings large amounts of rain with it because of the lake have a problem. Now, if I come back to my little neighborhood, my neighborhood has a little bit different problem because I have a tributary to Lake Houston that runs through my neighborhood that the drainage for the neighborhood was built into. And we've received a lot of funding from Washington to help offset the cost of making that ditch wider and being able to put it in Lake Houston. So that ditch goes down to Lake Houston. It was built years ago. It has some structures in it that I think people would like to see taken out. And there's some bridges that were put with some obstructions that are not allowing the water to flow as freely as it needs to flow. So to bring it up to speed, I mean, it was built back in the 80s. To bring it up to speed, I agree that it needs to have this improvement and this improvement situation gone on it. And it's going to need ongoing maintenance for sure. So to just say, be a one-trick pony and talk about Harvey, the flooding issues here in Harvey or since Harvey, they are gone so far beyond Harvey, it's not even funny because of some road building activity that went on that affected my neighborhood. It affected the entire North Park quarter of the town. So what I see is somebody that's not listening. I see somebody that's not asking for input and adjusting their viewpoint once they get the input. I don't expect everybody to know the flooding issue the way I do or some of my friends do. I don't expect that at all. But what I do expect is when we come and we give you the information, you don't just keep repeating and regurgitating the same information because I have no faith that you are going to act accordingly. So if I pull the camera out and I look at this a little bit, there are things that and I guess I don't know that I understand them at this point, but there's some people that are just simply upset to be upset, and are going to vote are not going to vote for incumbent just because they don't like incumbents. I think you have to judge somebody on the job they're doing. I don't know. And what I've told people is I have a really unique situation with my congressperson at the moment that that person is actively trying to help my community. Um, the other thing I'm going to tell everybody, because when I tell everybody this, it puts it in perspective. Okay. What happened in my neighborhood is people got in their cars in the morning and they drove to work. And some of those people put their animals in their cages because they don't like them running around their houses when they're not home. And they put their animals in their cages and they went to work. And they came home and those animals were deceased because they drowned in those cages because we had a flood with no warning. And to me, that's one of the most heart-wrenching things that is out there. Um, there's other things that like the flood warning system. Congressman Crenshaw put in a warning system for us. Mr. Toth said, we don't need warning systems, and he voted against warning systems. So there's things like that, but there doesn't seem to be really good explanations as to why we're voting it, and they're not explanations based in knowledge. They're just explanations based in platitudes. And what I'm going to say to anybody is when you have somebody running for Congress, you have to have them have your back first and foremost. That goes for any of us. Yes, am I, some of these things, people say, well, Ukraine. I'm like, well, I don't care about Ukraine at this point in my life because I have water in my backyard. So I got to vote for the guy that's going to keep the water out of my backyard. Then we can talk about Ukraine. I don't know what we're talking about, but we're going to talk about it. I've seen segments, on some of these talking head pundits that have a lot of money and they're well off. And if their house floods, they can get up and move. Unfortunately for this community, those houses are these people's biggest investment. And if they lose their house, they lose their retirement and they lose their livelihood. And in some cases, they lose the roof over their heads. So it's great that we want to talk in these really big, esoteric things. But the reality of it all is, when it really comes down to it, this community really has to evaluate where it stands, what they're getting out of it, what's happening, and is the person that they're voting for able to make the changes that they want if somebody else was there. I keep seeing talking points go by about the Epstein files. Um, Congress can demand the Epstein files, I guess, if they want. It won't do any good because all it is national security, and now they're sealed again. So it's talking points, just like giving, illegals Medicaid. It's talking point. What is really the truth and what is really not? And that's kind of really what, you got to look at here. For me, I'm going to look at what's best for the town that I live in first and foremost. And until this flooding situation is under control, we can't have somebody that doesn't support flood or wants to be, I'm going to call them a flood denier. The other thing that's happening is there's a lot of money being spent up in Montgomery County by the builders associations to make sure that they're electing officials that don't want to support legislation for anti-flood measures or interlocal agreements. And I will tell you, I personally filed an election campaign complaint years ago against somebody because it looked like they took a whole bunch of money and took it on the front side from a builder association or from a builder, and then resigned, but kept the money. And the election complaint, I got it back about 6 months after the election, and they said, no problem. The guy had won his election, and I didn't really pursue it or want to follow it up because it was pointless at the time to do that. But this is standard. These people are basically trying to buy a congressman. And this district in particular has been interesting because before redistricting happened, we had people trying to come from, very far away and try to run for this district. And actually, Mr. Toth, I don't believe lives in this district either. Apparently there's a flaw in the Constitution that says you don't have to live in the district you're trying to run for. But the people need to be aware of that. You need to be aware that you're picking somebody that doesn't live in the district. I think these are the things that we don't know. And we don't know because nobody tells us, and because the echo chamber's out there just parroting whatever you want. And when I go to social media, I get my talking points. I actually had to come up with a second social media account so that I could tip it the other way, so that I have two accounts that I can see this is what one side says and this is what the other side says. I was just I can't remember where I saw this, but they were talking about the former administration and the transportation secretary and some of the things that he said. And the consensus was that he never saw the other side of it because he only reads certain types of newspapers and certain types of TV shows. And I think we're all guilty of it. There's so many choices. The day of three talking heads on a TV are gone. You're always going to go to where, somebody agrees with you. The problem is that you don't get the full story when you do that, and all it's doing is emotionally charging the issue. So I welcome anybody to come and talk to me. If a member, if Mr. Toth wants to come and we'll have a conversation, I'll be very happy to have a conversation with him about this. I've got no problem with it. But to tell me that this didn't happen and this doesn't work when we're living on the front lines of it every day, I'm not saying this in a partisan way. I'm saying this in this is our reality. This is what's happening, and then from where you live and what's being done to where we live. I guess I have the option to move. I mean, I suppose I do always have that option. If I don't like what's going on, I could sell my house and move. Except that, unfortunately, the house values are not really what they should be because it's crippling us while it's enriching the other side. So those are the things that we all need to look at and how we think about things. So I really encourage everybody to take a look at this race. It is not all about, who's a rhino, who's not a rhino, who's more of a conservative. Oh, that's the other thing I want to address. Conservative think tanks. It's really kind of interesting to me that I keep hearing conservative think tanks vote this person the most conservative. I want everybody to put in their brain when they hear conservative think tank, that conservative think tank is actually another word for lobby group, that they're not agnostic people. And when you start to go pull those think tanks and look at the members of their board, my guess is you can go look at the donor rolls and on an FEC, and you can see that some of those think tanks are actually giving those candidates money. I'm not saying that's what's happening in this particular case, but I just want everybody to know that when somebody cites a think tank, the other thing is, do you represent the think tank or do you represent the constituents that vote for you? I think that's another question. We have another gentleman that's running too, and he just likes to tell us all he's voted the most conservative by this group and the most conservative by that group. Those are lobby groups. So to tell me that, how about you're voted the most conservative by the people that you represent? Are you representing them the way they want? Just don't say you're a conservative just to be a conservative. And don't say you're a liberal, just say you're a liberal. I mean, there's not you are obligated to represent your constituencies, not donor classes and not think tanks and not, these names for things to try to obfuscate what is reality and what is not. So that's my first podcast. I hope you'll join us each time. Of course, like and comment. I would appreciate that. We would like, if you want feedback and if you want to come and have a discussion on something, please feel free to contact me. It's Beth at talkingpurple.com, and reach out and we can get you to the right place, and we can get you on here. I've got no problem sitting down and having a conversation with anybody. I'm pretty well versed on things. Kind of comes with the territory of being a leader within a community that you kind of sort of know what's going on. So I think next up we're going to talk about government shutdown. If it's still shut down by the middle of the week, I said I've got a lot to say on that, and I've got a lot of facts and figures on that. Um, I will tell the Democrats and the Republicans the costing money to healthcare, blah, blah, stuff that's going on, 93% of Americans are not affected by it. So I think they need to know that. So with that said, that's Beth Guide. This is October the 12th, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.